Hi, welcome to the shop. Today what we're going to look at is the table saw. Table saw is a very versatile machine in the wood shop. It can do a variety of different operations. That's why it's one of the key components to a home shop. You'll probably see your parents having one, or if you're going to go into some sort of trade or woodworking, this is one of your first considerations for a tool, a big tool. So basically we have your guard. This guy can slide over. When he gets in place, you'll lock him in. We have a blade, which is made up of a number of teeth. You can buy coarse blade or a fine blade, depending on what you want to cut. Coarse blades is for putting wood through fast, and then if you're actually wanting to do some really fine woodworking, you want a nice smooth cut, you can get a smoother blade. All right, so when we look down here, we see the throat of the saw. This guy can come out for maintenance and changing the blade. This is painted red. So you don't want your fingers ever to be within that zone. It's way too close to the moving saw. We want to keep our fingers back whenever possible, because accidents happen anytime. So the back here is what they call kickback fingers, and they come up, and as the piece of wood goes in, similar to what's on the thickness planer, they try to lock the wood to stop it from going back this way. Pieces of wood hurt if you don't have this on. So if you were wanting to take this off, you put that there. There's a little red button here. You push it up and you can take it off, okay? If you walk up to the saw and it's in this state, or it's in this state, you are not allowed to actually use the saw. These must be put on. You can see the slot in the back. There's a little groove here that it fits into, and if you do it correctly, it's very easy to put in. You put it in, tap it, and then it doesn't come back out. You must use all guarding when using the table saw. So we'll put that in place. You can see that comes on top and hides our blade from, migrating fingers, that sort of stuff. Okay, so let's talk about ripping. You should not rip a piece of wood on anything but the table saw. The reason for that is it can fly out and break relatively easy and cause damage to you or the machine. All right, so ripping is when we want to take a piece of wood and go like this, right down the edge like that. So the table saw is well situated for that. Table saw will move a fence, set it to whatever size you want, put it up against the fence, and push it through. The important part when you're trying to use the fence is make sure that your piece of wood is up at the front and the back at the same time. Some people tend to make it go on an angle like this, and then when you get cutting, what happens is the piece slowly drifts this way and you get a real wonky cut. So what you want to make sure is that it's up like that, and then proceed to cut through all times. Now, one of the danger areas is this here. Some people, when they use push sticks, which are these, you can see they've got a little edge on the back, and they've got little corners cut in them. Some of them are worn away where people's fingers would have been damaged. Thank goodness the push stick took it instead. You want to leave these out so that they're readily accessible when you're trying to cut something. All right, so then what you want to do is, I don't feel it's very practical that you try to do a very long piece like this, or maybe longer, with push sticks. I find you're not in control. So what I like to see my students do is, if you have a big piece of wood and you're pushing it through like this, as soon as your fingers get onto this table, then I'd like you to stop, take your hand, put it like this, take this one, push stick, apply the push stick, then take your other push stick and put it against the other piece of wood. Okay, we'll set up our table so everything's within easy grasp. We'll turn the machine on. There's the point I want to change. Hang on, like this. Take this guy, and that way when you're going through, your hands are a safe distance from the blade at all times. All right, so that's how you want to do that. Now, This fence, there's a variety of different skills or different designs out there. And basically, this one has a quick release mechanism. The manufacturer thought it was a great idea. It is a great idea from one respect. If you want to change this to something else, you can pull that out and then take this out of the way. And it's pretty quick. So when you want to put it back in, you put it here and you lock it in place. And then when the handle is perpendicular with the floor, or 90 degrees to the floor, you can literally tighten this with one finger. But if you don't, and you leave it like that, where it's unlatched, you can push on this as hard as you want, and it'll still not lock on, okay? Now, setting up the fence. It's handy that when you actually put it in place, and you want to check, these two screws actually apply force on this edge. If this one is cranked in, the fence is going to go that way. And if you loosen this one and crank that one in, the fence is going to go that way. So what you want to do is, you want to make sure that this is parallel with the blade. So it's hard to do that with all the guarding and all the rest of it. So the machinery manufacturers put a groove in here for another attachment. So what you can do is line up off it. So you make one side flush, and then at the other side, if it's flush, it's good. But if you feel a lip on one side and flush at the other side, you know you have to adjust this. So I think I have to put that one in a bit, and that's tight on that, and you have to play around with it. If you have a problem with it, call the instructor, and he'll or she will set it up for you, okay? So that's just a quick way. Every time you come up to a machine, you check that, you adjust it if required, it locks, you're good to go. So another attachment for the saw is a miter crosscut. So this goes in to the slot, and it's used for chopping things to length. Before we had chop saws, before we had miter saws, this is what an individual would do. Take this, and we're just going to move our guard so that you can see the action, right? Then what you would do is you'd hang on to this, and you'd bring it across the blade, and you bring it back. If you needed a miter, an angled cut of some description on the end of a piece of wood, you just take this, go like that, set it to the right angle. That looks good for today. And then you would hold it, and away you go. All right, so there's a little latch on here for when you want to set it back to 0. Spin it, and it'll touch. Yeah. Make sure it's the right way. Make sure it says 90. And you're good to go. So those are the two most useful attachments. They make lots more, but that's what we'll be talking. Now, the only thing I didn't talk about was the blade height. This one's relatively, we did some cutting on some 2x4s earlier, and it's the right height. You can tell that it's going to cut through just barely. So what you want to do is, say for example, I'll just lower the blade. You can see very easily that that is not going to go through our 2x4. But maybe what you want to do is you want to look at this from this angle, and you put your hand on the wheel, and you make sure that the blade is coming all the way through the block of wood. Now, the other handle on the side here, say for example I wanted to put a chamfer on the corner of this. Well, I could take this guy off. He goes in here in a little slot. You can take your fence and set it to a certain size, 3 inches. And then what I could do is I could wind that blade and put it on an angle so that I could chamfer that corner. So that's some of the setups that you need to know when operating the table saw.